Yeah, it works well. We're kind of butting up against, like, Airbnb doesn't like to see you send more than a couple messages a day, so we're like balancing that out. But we've actually played around with like targeted TikTok ads, targeted Facebook ads to short-term rental owners. There's a whole, like, I don't personally do this, but there's a guy that I know, I would consider him a friend, that is doing arbitrage, where he's saying, hey, you have a short-term rental, I'll take it for a year, and then he's arbitraging it in 3-month like short-term insurance contracts, which I there can't be that big of the market for it, but I think it's really interesting, like, that somebody saw that opportunity.
Right. All right. Thank you for joining us for the Real Estate Law Podcast. Once again, Jason Muth here with Pride Away Stays and Straightforward Short-Term Rentals. Rory, today we're talking with Steve Werner. He comes to us from Lake Tahoe, and Steve is going to tell us all how we can retire early legally with lots of great tax strategies and lots of great investing ideas through the power of real estate, which we've talked about frequently on this podcast. But, we got to keep drilling in our heads. We don't have to work till we're 65, right?
Yeah, and we've talked about a lot of these concepts together, but I think Steve packages these up in a really nice way for our audience.
Yeah. Steve, welcome to the Real Estate Law Podcast.
Awesome. Jason, Rory, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Now, Steve has spoken frequently on main stages across the country about this topic. And, when we heard from his people, we were like, we're really eager to learn about how people can retire early. It's something that we've talked about a lot on this podcast. People don't understand how you can do it. But, the more we dig into real estate investing, we are real estate investors ourselves. Rory does everything legally because he's the real estate attorney among the two of us. We see all the different benefits of, the tax benefits of real estate. All right. And that's something that is probably one of the many tools that real estate investors use over the years in order to reinvest more money into their business and reach that retirement goal. So just before you introduce yourself, I want to just put you on the spot and say, what exactly is a way that you can legally cut your taxes by half and fast track your retirement?
I mean, there are a couple different strategies in real estate. It's interesting. I was talking to a landlord last week that was an active landlord, but wasn't using accelerated depreciation. One of the biggest things right now, right? Do a cost seg study, figure out how you can shorten your depreciation cycle, and take all of that against your taxes this year. We helped one investor last year, came to us. He would highly paid W-2. He made about $550 a year in W-2 income, had $160,000 tax burden. We wiped all of it out with one rental property. We got one good rental property, did good rehab on it, did the cost seg study, wiped out his entire tax burden, and now he has an asset that is paying him $3,000 a month that he basically got for free. And people don't understand that. When I got started, I don't know how old you guys were. I was lucky. I got started when I was 21. I read Rich Dad Poor Dad. I was an art major in college. Everybody told me that real estate would never happen. You can't do that stuff. I went out and in a year had 30 properties just hustling, and like the rest is history. But it's like, it's such a different mindset to what you're talking about. People are like, oh, I might be able to take 5 years off my retirement. No, you can take like 25 years off your retirement curve if you do it right. And it's really not that difficult. I love talking about this stuff because it's when people actually get it, it tectonically shifts their reality.
Yeah. Rory, we've talked about law school not training people as to how to, sell their businesses and really operate a business. They, talk about the ins and outs of the law is what you learn. Steve, art school taught you about advanced depreciation and tax benefits of real estate. Is that what I'm hearing?
Art school taught me to be creative. I would never knock art school. I graduated with $160K in debt, which I paid off very quickly because of real estate. But I think college is grossly overrated. I think you learn a lot more by talking to people. It's one of the reasons I love podcasts. It teaches you how to do a very specific skill in a theoretical place, right? That's what school is. Then you get out in the real world and you actually start doing it. So, I mean, I learned literally by going around and making a whole bunch of offers in college. I had no idea what I was doing. I read a couple real estate books. I was like, I'm going to go do it. And you learn by doing, right? You learn by having conversations with people. I had a guy in a real estate club that took me under his arm and he was like, hey, banks aren't going to lend to you because you're in college. You figured that out, right? And I was like, yeah, all the banks have laughed me out of their offices. He said, so why don't we work on how to make seller financed offers? So this was 2002, and I went out and I started making a whole bunch of seller finance offers. I got laughed at a lot. I probably made 60 offers before I had one that took off. The first one that took off for me was an 8-unit apartment building. So that, like, it's a great start, right? But it never would have happened. People are like, oh, you're lucky. I had 8 months of getting laughed at and slapped in the face with rejections, but I just kept taking action, right? That's usually what makes success.
Steve, you mentioned earlier before we hit record that you're from Philly, even though right now you live in Lake Tahoe and Texas, right? Did I get that right? What city in Texas are you?
Austin.
Austin.
Usually in Austin, and then come up here to get out of the heat.
Yeah. What a life. Art school was East Coast. Where'd you go to school?
Ohio. A small town called Mount Vernon, Ohio.
Right.
About 30,000.
So did some of the properties that you purchased, like that 8-unit, was that in Ohio? Like being in the proximity? Yeah.
Yep. One of the things that I tell people now, like, I didn't have available to me then. This was 2002. The internet was a new thing. Like, nobody was really investing outside of anything they could drive to, at least not mainstream, right? Now we teach people you can invest anywhere in the U.S. So why not pick a great place to invest? Our 3 criteria for that are 1, landlord-friendly state, 2, good solid job growth, and 3, we like to see states with a surplus budget. And if we threw a bonus one in there, it would be rent to income ratio. But you can invest anywhere in the U.S. When I got started, it was small town Ohio. We had about 35,000 people. And if I literally took a map and I drew a circle. I actually used a shot glass because, we were in college. To draw the circle, but it was about a 30 to 40 minute drive anywhere in that circle. I got 3 local newspapers. My daily routine was to go through the newspaper, call all the for rent ads, and ask the landlords if they were interested in selling. That was like my daily routine that led to 30 properties in the first year.
Rory, I just heard the title of the episode right there. I used a shot glass to identify a market radius for our properties.
And, we hear, going to the newspaper, looking for ads in the newspaper, so a lot of things have changed throughout the course of this. And kind of one thing we hit on is, what worked well as a polished, great investment strategy in 2005 was very different from what people were doing in 2009 and 2014, and far different from today. What was the evolution like for your investment strategy from the early 2000s until now?
I love that question. Yes, tools have changed a lot. So back then it was get the newspaper, go through and call the for rent ads. So now we're using, I'll share all 3 of them. So we use Facebook Marketplace. You want to look for private landlords. You're not looking for management companies, which you can tell usually really quickly just by the like headshot area, right? If it says property management, don't bother calling. Same thing works on Zillow. You can go through Zillow and you can find the single owners of apartment buildings. So look on Zillow, look for rent, and then go through, and you're looking for the mom and pop. If you're looking for a duplex, triplex, 4-unit, or a small multifamily, right? The other one that we've had a lot of success with lately, I'm like, I'll whisper, I'll lean in for this one. We've just been messaging people on Airbnb. Hey, because if you watch the Airbnb market over the last 5 years, right? Pre-COVID, then during COVID, lots of inventory. Everybody's like, oh, I'm going to buy a second house. Everyone's going to be traveling, blah, blah, blah. So we saw in Austin, for instance, Austin went from like 800, 900 available to 2,000 to 2,500. So what happens when inventory goes up, pricing goes down, people are making less money. We just started sending messages saying, hey, I've been looking for a place like this. Would you ever be interested in selling? We have about 1 out of 5 that say they would think about it.
Yeah, especially this day and age. I mean, like, we know the short-term rental market really well, being that we're invested in short-term rentals, and we run a short-term rental co-hosting business in Provincetown. And we've seen the same thing. A lot of people that have come into the market over the past couple of years are not getting the returns that they thought they were going to be getting. And, eventually you have to kind of ask yourself, like, is this worth it? Like, either pouring money into a property or breaking even, or, is this the best use of that investment, especially if it's a property that the investor or the owner is not using themselves. And Austin is a perfect market to do this because Austin, Nashville, Scottsdale, Orlando, these big markets that have blown up on Airbnb and the short-term rental sites where, everyone was just racing to them over the past couple of years. Those are the markets that are struggling right now, globally. You know what? I think that like people that are in my sphere would probably punch me in the face if they listen to that, especially if they own property in those markets. And I've heard a very astute and smart gentleman named Kenny Bedwell, who's with STR Insights, talk about how it has nothing to do with the market being saturated. It has to do with the bedroom count being saturated. So I get that. But Austin is one of those markets that if it goes from 800 units to 2,000 or whatever the numbers are, there's going to be some people that are struggling. So that's a really smart strategy.
Yeah, it works well. We're kind of butting up against like Airbnb doesn't like to see you send more than a couple messages a day, so we're like balancing that out. But we've actually played around with like targeted TikTok ads, targeted Facebook ads to short-term rental owners. There's a whole, like, I don't personally do this, but there's a guy that I know, I would consider him a friend, that is doing arbitrage where he's saying, hey, you have a short-term rental, I'll take it for a year. And then he's arbitraging it in 3-month, like short-term, insurance contracts, which I there can't be that big of the market for it, but I think it's really interesting, like that somebody saw that opportunity. Short-term rental in general, I think we saw like a big spike, and I think we're going to see it come down. And I think the people that do it well, it's going to force efficiency, right? How do you make it really, really efficient so that you're making money on less rentals and it's not driving you up a wall with management nightmares?
Yeah. One of the challenges with the arbitrage method is that there's a lot of cash outlay. You got to furnish these places and commit to the lease. And, if you can't get it leased out, then you are stuck. And then you're selling that furniture on Facebook Marketplace to people like yourself that are scouring Facebook Marketplace for deals. What kind of attorneys and lawyers were you using along the way? I should let Rory ask these kind of questions, but, since we are the Real Estate Law podcast, we should probably throw that in there.
I wondered if that question was going to come up. Not nearly enough. When I started, I was a poor college kid. So when I started, I was using stuff that was printed out of, I got this big book. It was called I think it was called the Yellow Book of Landlording, something like that. It looked like a phone book, but it was all about landlording and it had contracts in it. And I just literally went to the college photo machine for like 3 cents a copy and copied those off. That is not the right way to do it. Then I used some of the stuff that was online. Nowadays we have 2 legal firms that do all of our work for us at Home Invest. And we've been using them since I think 2012 or 13, a long time. And I would recommend that everybody do that. I was very lucky that I never had anything. I had a couple evictions, but those went fine. Those were using like standard rental agreements, right? I never had anything that went sideways to the point that it cost me anything, but I definitely could have.
Rory, what grade would you give to Steve as a budding investor early on without his, using too many attorneys there?
Some of those resources terrify me, the ones that are not state specific. There are certain businesses and certain things you can do where, things are uniform across the country. Landlording real estate that isn't entirely state specific. What are big major problems in one state are completely irrelevant in others, and some states require certain words and certain disclosures be provided to tenants. And if you're missing that, you're exposing yourself to a lot of struggle later on. Here in Massachusetts, we're a very tenant-friendly state, so if you don't follow the rules precisely, you're leaving yourself really vulnerable to your tenants, and you may not even be able to evict them, even if they are 100% in the wrong and not paying. So you want to make sure that you're following the state-specific rules for where you are.
I would agree with that. Now we own apartments in 5 or 6 states. And we have specific for each state. I second that quite a bit. We actually got, I'll share this. It's a little bit of egg on our face, but in Florida once, we had an offer in on a property and we had not worded it to the state specification. And we ended up we were able to get out of it, but we lost our earnest money on I think it was a 3-unit. It was a smaller property, but we did not word it correctly. So we ended up losing our earnest money because the seller called us out on it. And when we did the research, we were like, oh, and that was actually a great learning experience because it made sure that we are state specific on each thing we do. I think that is great advice. I would not advise what I did starting out. I don't think it's the right way to go.
Sometimes the best lessons, the painful ones, because you'll never do it again.
Yeah, you learn.
So we kicked this episode off talking about adopting the millionaire mindset and slashing your taxes by 50%, retiring up to 18 years early. Steve, how do you consult with people that they should be doing that? You mentioned a couple terms in the early part of this episode, which we should probably dig into a little bit. But, when somebody comes to a speech that you're doing or a talk or a one-on-one consultation or some of your investors or even just socially, if you're out and about meeting friends at, soccer games or breweries, and they ask you these questions like, how on earth do I do that? I'm stuck commuting an hour each way to work and I don't want to do that anymore. What is that mindset that the people have to adopt?
Yeah. So, okay. So many good questions in there. It depends on where they're at in their journey. If somebody tells me that, I had this conversation probably 3 weeks ago. Somebody told me, I hate my day job. I go every week. And I said, well, okay, what do you do to blow off steam when you're not at your day job? And normal answer, we go to some ball games, we go out to the bars, we're doing this stuff, right? One guy told me he collects wine. And I said, well, how much do you think you spend in wine in a month? And he said, maybe $500 or $600. And I said, well, okay, which would you rather have? That wine that goes in a fridge and maybe you drink it once in a while, and he was telling me all about his wine collection. I said, or if you took that same money and you started putting that aside, yes, it sucks because it's going to take a little while to build up. But if we can start, this is a person that makes $160K a year. There's no reason that he can't set aside probably 20 to 30% of his income to start putting that back, right? It does not take that much to buy your first property. Their mindset, going to mindset specific, when I'm talking to him right there, I said, so here's the difference. You're saying, I deserve. You deserve whatever you get. That's a tough pill for a lot of people to swallow, right? But if you're not setting yourself up, if you're not saying, I want to save for the future, I want to do this thing. He said, well, I just want it to be easy. I said, I'll challenge you a little bit on that, right? You want it to be easy to reach an early retirement. If it was easy, everybody would do it. And it's not that it's difficult, but it takes a change in thinking. Instead of getting out of your day job and saying, I deserve to go buy this $300 bottle of wine, or I deserve to go out to this ball game, or I deserve to go do this thing. Say, you know what? I deserve to treat myself well, and I'm going to put that money in the bank so that 6 months from now, I can go use it as a down payment. I'm sure you guys are aware, they changed the lending laws. Now 5% down, you can buy a 4-unit. That's one of the biggest opportunities if you're just looking to invest in real estate. You can buy a triplex or a 4-unit, 5% down. I understand the interest rates are high right now. That doesn't mean that there aren't deals to be had. You have to learn how to do that stuff. And the people that get excited about a side hustle or doing some work after work on their dreams are the people that will reach it. The other thing that you can do is just invest passively. If you're an accredited investor, you can find an accredited investment. It's not that hard to learn about what makes a good investment versus a bad one. It does take some studying. You want to have some confidence before you put, 100, 200, 300K into something. But if you're accredited and you have a 401k that you can turn into self-directed, most people, it's crazy the amount of people that don't understand self-directed. But you can take your money and you can put it into an apartment building. Somebody else does all the work. One of the things that we show on a slide is just the compound interest curve between the stock market, which is age 25 to age 70, and real estate, which is like a 15-year curve to get the same results. Those are the big ones. I know that was a big spaghetti ball of answer, but.
No, and you kind of started the conversation talking about the example of using cost segregation studies and bonus depreciation to negate your taxes. That's something we talked about a lot. But when I heard the example you gave us there, you had somebody making, six figures and doing quite well for themselves, needing to, to offset their tax liability. I imagine that step one to the problem they had was to go out and find somebody with real estate professional status and marry them. Is that step one is that a necessary step in maximizing your taxes?
That is definitely helpful. So if you guys aren't, I'm guessing your listeners are familiar with what real estate professional is. Without that, you can only write off up to $25K, which, is not going to be a huge, it's a good break. If you want to take advantage of it, beyond that, you have to have real estate professional status, or your spouse does, one of the two. You can, I'm not a real estate law attorney, you are. So we always put people in touch with our attorney, and they will walk them through the process of either getting that for themselves, showing 750 hours and showing income from that, or how can your spouse have that. Those are the two things that you're going to have to look at if you want to get there. We talk about it beyond 25K. So anyone who comes to us, we look at what their tax burden is, and we say, well, you can take 25K without it, which is still a lot for a lot of people. That will cover, if you're in the Midwest, you can buy a single family for 60K cash out of pocket and own it free and clear. You can easily buy that for 10 to 15K down, which offsets the taxes.
Can people in expensive markets do this? Like, do you have to live in the heartland of the Midwest for this to be successful?
Ooh, that's a good question. It depends because real estate is a million miles wide, right? I would say you can invest in a syndication anywhere in the US, right? Or outside, that can do very well and offer you great tax benefits of up to 25K without real estate professional. Sky's the limit after that, right? If you get that. If you're looking to invest yourself personally, this goes back to the whole shot glass analogy. One thing that I would change, if I could go back and tell myself to do something different, or what changed in the last 20-ish years, is at that time, I wanted to be able to drive to my investment. People that live in California that come talk to us that say, I want to do active, I'm like, hey, you need to look at something outside of California. California is not landlord-friendly, it is not cash flow friendly, and it's not rent-to-income friendly. That's not where you want to own property right now. You have to be willing to get outside of that. So instead of using a shot glass, you just have to look at the U.S. map and pick where you want to be, which means the property has cash flow enough to support property management.
Yeah, and sometimes that's difficult for people, if you live in an expensive market or where it's not friendly to landlords, because the easiest thing to do is to invest where we are, in our general radius. We actually recommend to people, if they want to get a second home, since we work in the short-term rental space, to consider getting a home that you might use. If you have the money to do it, you might want to use the property. And, how easy is it for you to get to that property? Is it within a 2 or 3 mile drive or 2 or 3 hour drive of where you live? Or are you hopping 3 flights to get there, and you're probably never going to use that property, therefore it's going to have to cash flow, or you use the tax benefits for it. But, for the first-time investors, being able to tangibly see and stand in and touch and hit a hammer into a nail into the wall is something that they often like. So we try to say, keep it simple. We're not raising money out there. We don't have any syndications, but, when people ask us like how we got going, that's what we say, because that's exactly what we did. I know we're coming up on time. I do want to ask one of our final questions and then ask, where people can learn more about you and some of the work that you're doing right now, Steve. But I'll fast forward to our second of the final questions, which is tell us something that happened early in your life or career that impacts the way you're working today.
Oh, man. When I was I have so many different pieces I could point to. When I was about 8, 1986, Michael Jordan, the shoes came out, right? And I was 8 years old, and I remember my mom and I were at the mall. We were getting school shoes, and I really wanted them. I think the price that sticks in my head was $98 Finish Line. And my mom sat me down and told me, like, we were outside the store, and she was like, "We're not spending that on shoes." Like, that was a lot of money back then. Like, that was not a cheap pair of shoes. And I threw a little bit of a tantrum. I remember like sitting on the metal bench with like the crisscross patterns, right? And like just being angry, and my mom like kind of dragged me out of the mall. And somewhere in that conversation, she said, "Well, if you want those shoes," she was like, we don't have the money to afford those. She was like, "If you really want those shoes, you gotta go get a job." And she said it in passing. Well, I went home and grabbed the lawnmower, and I mowed enough yards that night to go buy them the next day. And then my mom, like, I rode my bike to the mall to get them, and I came back, and my mom thought I had stolen them. So she was like, where did you get those? And I told her, she had seen me go out with the lawnmower the night before. She just thought I was, to be honest and fair to my mom, I was a pretty crazy kid. She just thought like I was probably, I don't know, like angry and just going out and mowing the yard. But that led to me, by the time I was, 12 or 13, having a couple grand stuffed under my bed in a shoebox. That then led to me buying my first car, which then led to me having, a really good amount in savings when I went off to college, which led to the change in mindset, I think, of when people tell you that you can't do something, you absolutely can. Somebody out there has done it, especially in today's world. We now live we are no longer in the information age. We are in the action age. Information, you can type anything you want into Chat GPT or on the internet, and you're going to get an answer. There is somebody out there who has done the thing. You can find it. It's just up to you if you want to take action on it. And I think one of the things that shuts more people down than anything right now is too much information. There's too much out there, and they get overwhelmed, and they're like, what do I do? And that's paralysis by analysis, right?
Yeah. I mean, you could just go on and on, analyzing deals, analyzing directions and strategies. Thankfully, Rory jokes at me that I agonize over decisions in the grocery store, but for big life decisions, they happen very quickly. So I don't know. It seemed like it served us pretty well, right?
So far it works. I mean, the choice over ketchup takes forever, but the choice over investment properties can happen instantly.
That's good. I mean, we see people that analyze deals over and over and over. We have a guy that's been with us for probably 3 years that analyzes, and he hasn't bought a property. He's in our education program where we help people like figure out how to buy their own, right? And it's like, dude, you learn the most by pulling the trigger on something and jumping in. And yeah, the really nice thing about real estate as a class of investment, big asterisks, but you're not going to get hurt too bad as long as you do a decent job analyzing. You might lose a little bit. You might break even. You might have to hold it, and it might be a pain. But to your point from earlier, Jason, you learn the most from the things that hurt. And if you never take the shot, you're never, ever going to get anything. You'd be better off buying something 5 years ago that was break even and learning the game than just sitting on the sidelines.
100%. Yeah. Because then you learned nothing along the way and you took no chances.
Yeah.
Since we're running low on time, we'd love to have you back at some point, Steve, to talk even more about a lot of these concepts. But, until then, where can people learn more about the work that you're doing and what you're working on?
Sure. If you're interested in any of my stuff, you can go to steve.coffee. That will either put you on my calendar if you want to learn about an investment. You can also, we have a nonprofit where we go teach financial literacy to kids. If you'd be interested in having me come speak about budgeting, we make a really fun workshop out of it. That's at steve.coffee. If you want to learn more about us at Home Invest, it is homeinvest.com. It is myself and my partner, Nate, and we have a team there as well, specializes in syndications that get our investors huge tax benefits while doubling their money in 4 to 6 years.
Steve, how do you take your coffee?
Black.
Yeah. Iced or hot?
Hot. Always hot.
Always hot. Oh, you're from Philly, the whole Northeast. We always drink iced coffee all day, every day, all year.
So part of the perk of being in art school is I got to do a semester abroad in Italy. So when I went to Italy, this is a fun side story. I used to have I was like the 3 flavored creamers, like 4 sugars. Like it was like a milkshake when I was done, right? In Italy, it doesn't matter how much cream or sugar you put in your coffee, it's still black. Like it doesn't change color. I don't know how they do it. It must be something in the water over there, but that led to me just drinking black coffee for the rest of my life.
All right. Black Coffee in Bed. Excellent song. Rory, where can people find out about you?
You can find me through my law firm. I'm at Urban Village Legal, urbanvillagelegal.com.
All right. And if you want to be a guest on this podcast, please go to realestate.podcast.com. You can see all of our past episodes. See if you think that you'd be a great guest. Fill out a form and write to us. Let us know. If you listen to this on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, we love reviews if they're 5 stars. Otherwise, just email us directly and we'll take care of whatever concerns you have. We read all your questions and comments, and you can subscribe to us on YouTube as well. Steve, thank you so much for all of your time today. We really appreciate hearing a little bit about your wisdom and your pathway from art school to where you are today. And we're going to circle back with you and get you back on the podcast when we have a little more time to chat.
Awesome. Thanks so much, guys. It was great hanging out.
All right.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening.